All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, Senator Bernie Sanders is a front-runner mode, and he's acting like it. With his campaign leaking to the Washington Post yesterday, he's preparing dozens of executive orders for his first day in office. Per Jeff Stein at the Washington Post, the executive orders span a dozen on immigration, climate change, the global gag rule, Puerto Rico funding, prescription drug, and legalizing of marijuana. I will let you guess which of these I disagree with the most, but we don't have time to get into weed yet again. It's worth diving into immigration policy in particular, though. Sanders' team, they have executive orders ready to go that would reinstate DACA, TPS, end ICE raids completely, rescind the public charge rule, lift the cap on refugees, and end construction of the border wall. Now this, as you have all heard me say before, is complete electoral folly that actually validates a central critique of Sanders and Elizabeth Warren even from the right. That even though they have some occasionally pretty good ideas when it comes to the economy, that basically a vote for them is existential because of the imperial nature of the presidency and executive orders. Again, nobody knows better than Bernie Sanders that encouraging illegal immigration in the United States depresses American wages. You can ask him back in 2007.
If poverty is increasing and if wages are going down, I don't know why we need millions of people to be coming into this country as guest workers who will work for lower wages than American workers and drive wages down even lower than they are right now.
Or you can ask Sanders back in 2015.
Open borders?
Open
borders. That's a Koch brothers proposal. The
Really?
idea, of course. I mean, that's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of the global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. And I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that. If you believe in a nation state, or in a country called the United States or UK or Denmark or any other country, you have an obligation, in my view, to do everything we can to help poor people.
I want to give Sanders credit. In his interview with the New York Times editorial board this year, he said he still holds the position that illegal immigration depresses American wages, which is at least a start in the Democratic Party. And his proposed solution is to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour for all workers. At the very least, I accept the economics of that argument. But the problem is, what does it take to raise the federal minimum wage in the United States? An act of Congress. So in this way, Bernie is pandering to the far left with these day one executive orders because we all know that any president since Franklin Roosevelt only gets 100 days to do anything. Sanders pledges he's going to spend all his time on Medicare for all. So let's take him at his word. Then in terms of immigration and protecting American workers, he's basically doing to them what Elizabeth Warren did on Medicare for all. He's putting the politically easy choice first, then promising the extraordinarily difficult part after. The easiest thing in the world is to give people amnesty, ending all immigration enforcement in this country, incentivizing illegal immigration and their use of public services, and then making it easier for everybody to compete with American workers without protecting workers is precisely the opposite of the pledge that he claims he will make. And I've said here on the show before, this is an absolute electoral death knell for Sanders. For illegal immigration without congressionally codified protections in law rightfully should be viewed as a moral disaster for American workers. While health care is the #1 issue, it shows a lack of real care for the American working class, and it lacks recognition that the majority of people in America want less immigration. Health care may be the #1 issue in the Democratic primary, but it's not the #1 issue in a general election. Bernie's alliance with the worst elements of his coalition are going to lose him the election. And if he wants to empower them, then I think he does deserve to lose. And I'm actually curious for your response on that, Krystal, because I don't know why he would put all of these executive orders on day one when, look, I actually believe him whenever he says that his solution for illegal immigration is to give every worker in this country $15 per hour minimum wage in order to stop wage arbitrage that happens. Again, I don't agree with it. I think it is perfectly sound as a response. But that's not going to be a day one priority for him, and this is a day one priority for him. And that's my greatest concern, which is that President Reagan gave 3 million people amnesty and promised a bunch of enforcement. The enforcement stuff never came. The amnesty did. And now they all live here, and that's essentially what ended up happening, and wages went, plummeting down to the ground.
Well, let's just dispel with one myth, which is that the problem for American workers is immigrants.
Well, no,
it's
not a huge
problem. It's not, and that's the problem. So
yeah.
You've laid out this is why you could never support, a leftist like Bernie Sanders. The reason why I could never support the right-wing nationalism is because it always just collapses down to it's their fault. So what do we have in the Trump administration? The rhetoric of it's the immigrants' fault. It's their fault that your wages are low. Meanwhile, giving the store away to the plutocrats like they've been doing for decades, right? So this is a fundamental. So I think you're wrong both on the policy and on the politics. On the politics, there is massive support for comprehensive immigration reform.
Totally.
That's a reality.
Yeah, but they want less overall
They want a path to citizenship. No, that doesn't mean we just open the borders, right? You should know who is coming into your country. That's that's absolutely the view of myself, of Bernie Sanders, et cetera. But you can't have people who are getting paid under the table, because that is a problem for American workers. If you can pay someone, $5 an hour, no taxes, and you have to pay an American worker $15 an hour, or $7.25 at least at this point, and have labor protections, et cetera, that is the disaster for American workers. There's simply no evidence that increased low-skill immigration actually is a detrimental effect to native-born workers. Now, at the high end, I think the high-skilled workers, that does depress wages. For high-skilled workers, I don't really particularly care about that, but there is no evidence that low-skilled immigration actually harms workers. So I think you're wrong on the politics, and I think you're wrong on the policy. And this is the fundamental divide, though, between the type of nationalism that you support and the type of democratic socialism that Sanders and I support.
I think the difference, though, is, well, there is evidence of low-skilled workers do depress wages. But the real thing is I actually agree about the plutocrats. I don't blame immigrants or low-skilled people for wanting to come here and make a higher wage than they make back in their home. I don't blame them whatsoever. Any rational person would do that. I blame big corporations in alliance with government who want, that's the thing, I agree, it's the plutocrats. Who does low wages work for better than anyone else? It doesn't work for Americans. It doesn't work even for the immigrants themselves, who are often taken advantage of by these companies. It works for the benefit of Tyson's Foods, of the big agricultural companies, of all of these people. I do not blame immigrants. And you know what? If you talk to the non-racist people who want illegal immigration restriction in this country, that's what it all comes down to. It's about corporations who are exploiting actually immigrant workers and American workers to the detriment of everybody, because we can have lower prices.
Down on those corporations. But the other piece that I hear coming from the right is a lot of hand-wringing about our demographics and how there aren't enough young people and all of that. I'm not putting that on you, but that is the argument I hear coming from the right. Well, guess what? You have a whole young population that wants to come into the country, that is here, that you could bring out of the shadows, that would actually be an asset to our country. I mean, look, it's not exactly analogous, but I was talking to a friend of yours, Sam Hammond, who was an economist for Canada.
He's a good guy.
And he says, we're trying, we need more population. That's an asset for us. We have this mentality. It's a mythology of scarcity in this country. It's one of the reasons I love Andrew Yang's campaign, is because it is centered around getting rid of this mythology of scarcity. The idea that there isn't enough for everybody to have health care, for immigrants to be able to come in reasonable numbers and have access to health care and public education and contribute to society. I think that is the biggest myth and the biggest tool of social control that is weaponized in this country. And that's what I see the right doing. Rather than dealing with, I'm not putting this on you. I'm putting this on, the Trump administration as the current example. Rather than actually dealing with the structural issues of the economy, it is so much easier to just say, it's their fault.
So the way I look at it, it has been characterized as it's their fault. But and you know what? I'll blame the Trump administration for not making this case accurately, because they instead have decided to ally themselves with big business and make the economic case that I'm talking about, which is that the greatest criminals are the ones who want to depress wages for immigrants and for American workers. But on that case about the younger people that want to come here, I do think it is actually immoral to a worker to say that we are abandoning you in favor of bringing in people in order to overall increase our population. The way I look at it is that we should make it so that all workers should be incentivized to have kids. If they want to, they should be able to have as many kids as possible. So for me, if the great crime is making costs of living so high that moms and dads have to decide between having another kid or not having another kid. People should be able to have as many kids as they want in this country and still have have a healthy economic life.
And here's what I will say
Yeah.
is that, and I hear this a lot from working class people. You're right about this. That I can't even get health care.
Exactly.
Right? Like I don't even have the wages I need to survive. How can you be letting all these people in and giving them health care? There's a lot of mythology around like immigrants and all the the welfare. There's like a welfare queen thing going on with immigrants, which is totally phony and not true. But I do think it is legitimate to say, when I can't even get health care, why are we worrying about these people? But under a Sanders administration, the whole idea is no, everyone has health care. And I think that is the fundamental political philosophy, is getting rid of this idea of scarcity, having fundamental economic rights for all, including immigrants, including refugees who are welcoming into the nation, and that universality is to the benefit of all.
The problem I have is actually the political order of operations. I don't doubt his motives. I really do appreciate all the stuff with good faith. It's that the order of operations is such, in American politics, as we all know, is that when you have these types of things, you end ICE raids, all this. Look, immigration, comprehensive immigration reform, if that was going to happen in Sanders' administration, it'd be number 3 or 4 for his priority, right? Medicare for all has to come 1. Well, in that 3 and 4, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, which is already happening right now, who are entering the United States. And under a Sanders administration, all of them would get to stay, all of them would get health care, all of them would have access to public services, and then we're supposed to legalize all these people. I think that is an immoral case for workers and for wage arbitration, because you can only do one really big thing in America. If he wants to give everybody health care, you know what? We can have that discussion. But for me, it's about the order of operations. And again, with amnesty, the easiest thing in the world. This is what happened with TPS. TPS was never supposed to be a long-term thing. Now half these people have been here for like 35 years because of like an earthquake in Ecuador. And it's like, which we're only supposed to temporarily be here. It's easy to let people in. The harder part is figuring out, how do we deal with it from a public society, from a wage perspective? And listen, there are racists who are on the right who want to restrict immigration only for cultural reason.
Right. I
want nothing to do with those people. I hope they can rot in hell. But I do think that this is a fundamental divide that I don't see enough. I don't see enough even consideration of this from Sanders and his team, and that is what really bothers me. And I think it fundamentally bothers a lot of people who, like you said, they're like, listen, man, I got to pay $20,000 a year in daycare, and you want to give health care to illegal immigrants who just come across the border? That's wrong.
Right.
I do think it's wrong.
But that's also mythology. But I mean, look, the reality,
right?
It's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, immigrants who are coming across undocumented are getting the same, emergency room health care that Americans are, right? Where you show up.
That's bad for everybody.
Bad for everybody, exactly. So, look, I think we're going to have a lot more of this conversation.
Yeah.
Something tells me.
Good.
Going forward, I think you're wrong on the politics and policy, but we're going to continue to debate it out.
Gallup chart says otherwise.
Next up on Rising, the editor of the New Republic, Chris Lehman, shares his thoughts on the Iowa caucus. That is next.